The driving seat now, Britain. Cinch. Cars without. Punch.
Wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down. This is wet.
And they were touching down in Heathrow 3 times a week. We sat here and thought, not sure that's a bright idea. When northern Italy went into lockdown first time around, and the planes were coming in from Milan, you're thinking, okay, well, fine if this is thought to be safe. And you know what? At the time, it was thought to be safe. We go back over the minutes, it's written down. The minutes of these meetings of organisations like NerveTag saying in January last year, or rather in fact in December 2019, they were saying that this didn't need to happen because it was deemed ineffective. And the minutes of the meeting show that the Department for Health pushed and said, well, what would be effective? What could we do? And they said, listen, once it's here, it's here. There's no point in locking down the borders then because you're having to deal with the virus in country. So I agree, common sense would say that it's the right thing to do, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, general scientific opinion at the time seemed to be that it was ineffective. And to be honest with you, that view has lingered for 12 months. You interview members of NerveTag who conducted these meetings now, and they say, well, broadly, the modelers were saying that it was largely ineffective. 0345 6060 973. Come back to your calls on that in just a moment. I want to touch on a couple of stories actually that have been around over the last few days regarding China and the big shift that is going on with this country's relationship with China, having gone from the golden era of the Cameron Osborne days a few years ago, now down to something else entirely. There's the story in the Times today that almost 200 British academics are being investigated on suspicion of unwittingly helping the Chinese government build weapons of mass destruction. They are suspected of violating strict export laws intended to prevent intellectual property in highly sensitive subjects being handed to hostile states. The security services are concerned that British intellectual property could fall into the hands of the Chinese government, which may well help Beijing to develop weapons of mass destruction. You may have seen the story a few days ago that Chinese nationals have been expelled from Britain because they were actually journalists. They were posing as journalists, but were actually spies. Shashank Joshi joins us, defence editor at The Economist. Thank you for your time this afternoon, Shashank. What are we to make of these reports about academics and being funded to do this kind of work?
Well, first of all, we should be very clear. These aren't people who are being told, design a nuclear bomb or design a missile. It's the nature of modern military technology.
The same scumbags that are going out there every day, spreading disease among communities. They're the people that we need to be targeting.
What about the idea that these are people who, Frank, what about the more empathetic view, which are these are people who are cannot afford to keep self-isolating if they're pinged by the app or whatever for 10 days and need greater financial support. They need help in order to isolate rather than punishment.
Well, sure. I mean, there probably are some genuine cases, no doubt about it. But I'm aware of people in my area who are working and people who are earning money and could have quarantined when they were supposed to. People who came back from holidays, they've been off for 2 weeks wherever, and they've spent $5,000 on a holiday. I'm talking about gone to somewhere very, very posh. Stayed in a 5-star hotel, and for someone to tell me that they can't afford them to quarantine for 10 days when they come home, well, that's pretty pathetic. I realise that won't be all the cases, but, the only way we're going to get out of this thing is close the borders. Close the borders today. It's just a shambles. That would have been the most effective way of keeping this thing out of the country. We're a small island. We should never have got into this condition. It's an absolute disgrace. And just tag people who just won't play by the rules.
Listen, I don't know whether that would be possible. I don't even know if the phone tracking would be possible. But I think broadly, greater enforcement of quarantining at home for the people who have arrived back in this country is going to happen if we want to keep the numbers of of people catching this thing down. Listen, Frank, thank you. I want to move on. Frank, you talked about crime there, and I want to move on to that because the Prime Minister has spoken in the last hour or so about what we've seen over the course of the weekend happen in London, where you might be aware 12 people were stabbed over the course of 48 hours. 2 people have very sadly died, and the ages of the people involved is incredibly young. The Prime Minister is saying that he's concerned about a crime rebound as lockdown ends. Are you?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 3 o'clock, Boris Johnson's insisted he remains very confident in the coronavirus vaccines in use in the UK. It's after concerns were raised that the AstraZeneca jab may be less effective against milder illness caused by the South African variant. The Prime Minister hasn't ruled out a delay in easing the lockdown because of the strain. Dr. Mukesh Kapila, Professor of Public Health at the University of Manchester, says people shouldn't be too concerned.
Today's vaccine-making technologies in use are able to reinvent the vaccine or modify the vaccine to react to new variants. And I think we just have to get used to the fact that the vaccine is going to keep on changing, and every year we are probably going to have to renew our vaccination to react to the latest strains that are circulating around the world.
Downing Street's admitted no formal contracts have yet been awarded for firms to operate quarantine hotels. The policy requiring British residents returning from red list countries to undergo supervised isolation is due to come into force next week. Ministers issued a commercial specification to hotel operators last week. Some schools and coronavirus vaccine centres have been forced to close because of heavy snow. Weather warnings are in place across much of the east of England and Scotland. Motorists have been warned not to travel. Brian Biggerstaff from Highways England says most people are staying at home.
Over the weekend, we're seeing sort of a 50% drop in traffic than we did this time last year.
Can I get the big tasty milk, please? A large one.
The same amount of resources we would at any other time, just to make sure that
Fanta.
Around 2,500 jobs are being cut after the sale of Dorothy Perkins, Wallace and Thurston. The online
Is that a large one?
has agreed to buy
Is it large?
£25 million, but the deal doesn't include any of the retailer's physical shops. Formula One world champion Sir Lewis Hamilton has signed a new one-year contract with Mercedes. The British driver says he's looking forward to achieving more incredible things in his 9th season with the team. The new campaign is due to get underway in Bahrain next month. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was up 64 at 65.53. The pound buys $1.37 and a euro 13. And the weather feeling very cold this afternoon. Some longer spells of snow, mainly in the east, drier further west, a high of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Thomas Watts.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Thomas Warbrick.
Afternoon to you, 3 minutes past 3 is the time. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC, in for Sheila Fogarty all this week. Hope you find you as well as can possibly be, and if you've just joined the programme, of course, as ever, a very warm welcome to you.
What about stock?
Come back to something that I asked Labour's
barbecue
Shadow
sauce?
Immigration Minister, Holly Lynch, about, which is a growing narrative around the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. By the way, how fair or otherwise you think that narrative is, I'm more than up for discussing. But there is a growing narrative, particularly after the last 7 days, which weren't great for Keir Starmer and his team, that the Labour leader isn't quite doing enough certainly according to one poll, to be ahead in the polls, and according to the same poll, to be ahead of Boris Johnson on questions like ability to manage the country out of the pandemic crisis and into the recovery phase. And there's a sense from some, particularly on the Labour left, that Sir Keir Starmer isn't quite doing what he needs to do and needs to buck up his ideas. So much so that the Huffington Post is reporting that a coalition of those on the left within the Labour Party, including some smaller unions, are lobbying the Labour ruling body for an extraordinary emergency conference to discuss the leadership of Sir Keir Starmer and how to put it, in their words, right. You heard Holly Lynch, I think dismissing it really, suggesting that he's doing what needs to be done, Sir Keir Starmer, in order to keep the government's feet to the fire and appeal to the broadest possible selection of voters across the country in order to, in some stage over the course of the next 4 years, win enough votes back to get into number 10. We'll go into that in more detail after the news at 30:30, including the polls and what might be the future of Labour under Sir Keir Starmer, particularly Labour factionalism under Sir Keir Starmer, which is, I think, possibly the main reason why this seems to be happening right now. Come on to that a bit later. I do, though, I'm afraid, want to talk about what's happened over the course of the weekend, particularly in London, but it will have affected other cities around the country as well. But it has become incredibly acute over the last 48 hours in London when it comes to knife crime. 2 men have been killed, 14 more have suffered knife attack injuries in what's been described as a harrowing weekend of violence in London. The Met Police say that at this stage they don't believe any of the attacks are linked. They are appealing for the public's help to catch those that are responsible. The violence began on Friday. Someone had their face slashed in Hatton Gardens. A man was stabbed to death on February 6th in the evening in Kilburn. The violence spread across 10 incidents, mainly in South London. 7 of the victims knifed were in the borough of Croydon. On Friday, a 22-year-old man was killed in Selhurst in Croydon, an investigation being treated as murder. There were also knife attacks in Brent, Westminster, Wandsworth, Camden and Bromley as well, with at least 1 victim still in a critical condition. It seems that the 22-year-old who very sadly lost their lives has been named as Sven Badzak. Killed on Saturday, his friend left fighting for his life. They were chased and attacked in Kilburn. Horrific scenes, and as an example of just what a waste this loss of life has been, and the kind of trivial incidents that seem to be sparking this horrific violence. It's reported that Mr. Badzak was on his way to the shop when he was attacked. His mother has spoken out, just absolutely distraught, saying that her son Sven was an aspiring lawyer, was her only child, and quotes, "My everything. I invested all my life for him to have the best possible life. He could charm everybody, even the hardest people." She said he was a future prime minister. Described her final words as he kissed her goodbye and went to buy a bagel, saying, "I love you, Mum. I said I love you too. Please come back soon." That was the last conversation I ever had with him. Those are the words of Sven Badzak's mum, speaking to Sky News a little earlier. The Prime Minister was asked about this spate of stabbings that we've seen in London and spoke about an hour or so ago. This is what he had to say.
We've seen a big fall in crime figures in the last few months, but I'm worried about it rebounding as we come out of lockdown. So we're really now redoubling our efforts to make sure that we do 2 things. First of all, that we have a tough policing policy response, so that we do all the stop and search, and we have the proper custodial sentences for young people who go equipped with knives and so on. But we also make sure that kids, young people, have other things to do. They don't get sucked into the culture of the nihilistic culture of these gangs, particularly county lines, drugs gangs, and we're having some success now in rounding those up. That's no consolation, I know, to a grieving mother, but we are doing absolutely everything we can to fight those gangs.
The Prime Minister speaking earlier, as you heard there, worried about crime rebounding once lockdown is lifted. The Home Office announcing today that funding worth more than 35 million quid is to be given to communities to help tackle serious violence and to prevent young people from getting involved in such crimes. It feels like we've been here before, I'm afraid, in discussing what needs to happen, what needs to change, where the key areas are, where the change is most required to try and get a grip of this knife crime. The idea, though, that the lockdown lifting would see a rebounding in crime is, I think, not on the face of it, pretty obvious, given people have been asked to stay indoors for this long. But I wonder to what extent lockdown itself may have had an effect on crime, and certainly because we hear a lot about them in the context of discussions about knife crime. The families of those kids for whom home is not a pleasant experience, where families are not particularly able to support children who would otherwise be in school trying to receive that support, but getting them into school is very, very difficult, that could be caught up in that spiral of gang violence and knife crime, would be easy targets for the gang leaders to pick off and to envelop into their world. And I wonder to what extent you think lockdown might have pushed a certain percentage of people into that lifestyle, into that culture, because there's nothing else, because school's not there, because mum and dad are working incredibly hard and just can't deal with the additional stress that's put on them as a result of lockdown. And so maybe one of the effects, very sadly, of this lockdown is more young people, more vulnerable young people will have been pushed into gang violence and potentially knife crime. 0345 6060 973 84850 to text. You can tweet at LBC. 10 past 3. Chris Lewis is the founder and CEO of Mentivity, which is an award-winning mentoring organisation working across London and Brighton. Thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Just picking up on what the Prime Minister said there about a rebounding of crime being possible once lockdown is lifted. Do you share those concerns?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me. I do share those concerns because I'm doing the work on the ground, as well as many other organisations, and we know that this is going to be coming. But we're in the midst of a mental health crisis amongst young people, and these are issues that have been further compounded by lockdown. This is not as a result of lockdown. We've had nearly 1 billion cuts to youth services since 2010, and it's quite rich from Boris Johnson saying that young people are nihilistic, but they don't have anything to do. Lockdown now and COVID-19 has made young people think that there's no future for them. So we've got to a point where if our head of state, Prime Minister, said to us, right, young people are nihilistic, that's a problem within itself. That we've now taken so much away from young people that they can't even dare to dream, but they can't even focus on trying to survive. This is what young people are trying to do. They're trying to survive in this terrain. Sorry, Tom?
I'm a bit taken aback by that, to be honest with you, because it presents a very grim...
It's built around capitalism in this country. Young people want a piece of that pie. And if you're not providing opportunities for young people to actually flourish, we've got a major partnership with Goldman Sachs on our Raising Aspirations project. We're allowing young people to dream to be part of an organisation which they otherwise would know nothing about.
Yeah.
So we're not taking so much from young people. You are actually funneling and actually putting them on a track to disaster. Some young people will navigate and be able to stay on track. But when you haven't got these kind of support mechanisms in place for young people and allowing them to actually move forward in life, they're going to try and make money. That's what these young people are trying to do, is make money and feel validated by that. So yes, it is a quite stark reality, but that is a reality for so many young people in South East London, across the UK.
Yeah, I think listen, I absolutely bow to your experience, and I think that may well ring true for an awful lot of people about the lack of opportunity that they found when they started out. I just wondered to what extent any government can actually do in providing that opportunity. You talk about a partnership there with a very big bank. I mean, I do wonder to what extent private companies can be brought in to help out here, because they are the ones that ultimately are going to have the opportunities available for those people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our Raising Aspirations project is groundbreaking, and to have a major investment bank like Goldman Sachs supporting us on that just shows you that they believe in what we're doing. And the fact is that if we have to look to private companies to bridge the gap for young people in terms of investment, that means our government has failed. And the government has consistently failed in so many areas, but especially when it comes to youth and young people. If we had to reinvest money in education in 2022-2023 academic year, we'll have to replace 4.7 billion to basically bring us up to the standard of what it was like in 2009. We're extracting so much for young people, and yet we're still expecting them to flourish. And we can't be so naive as adults that we haven't had a part to play in this. The government has had a part to play in what is going on right now. And we need to invest in community groups and organisations that understand what's going on. This whole bureaucracy around funding and the difficulties and all the hoops you have to jump through just to showcase that you can do the work for young people, it just puts a lot of people off, because not everybody is able to write a funding bid. Not everybody is able to articulate themselves on paper. So we've got to make it a lot easier.
You mentioned funding. Just quickly on the funding that's been announced today. £35.5 million to help violence reduction units, which support projects that carry out preventative work with children and young people to battle what they describe as the horrors of physical attacks. Is that money, is it enough? But that's a sort of slightly redundant question, because I guess more money is always going to be more helpful. Is it getting to the right places?
No, it's not. And a lot of organizations, a lot of large organizations that are supposed to be there for youth are not doing what they should be doing. And we have a lot of middlemen and middle people in society who are actually taking money, extracting money from these young people for their own gain. And I think we need to really look at how this funding is being given to organizations. And it's great that the Home Office have announced it today, but how long will it take for this funding to get to young people? It takes too long. A day in a young person's life is a very long time. A week, 6 months is a very long time. We've got to be more proactive when it comes to young people. We've got to consult young people. We've got to listen to young people. We've got to be led by young people. Because ultimately, if we don't give them that responsibility and allow them to grow, they're never going to be able to get to the point where they can actually run this society and make a better society than what we've got today.
And very finally, in a sentence, do you share the Prime Minister's worries that crime is going to rebound once the lockdown lifts or starts to lift?
It's inevitable. I mean, we've had everyone in lockdown, so it's inevitable that it's going to rise. But again, we've got a mental health fallout. We've got a generation that's been neglected consistently. I'm not making excuses. Young people that do commit crime, yes, we have to deal with them. But we've got to support them before they get to that point. We have to guide them on their journey of discovery, their journey of life. And we're not doing enough as adults.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Stace Holmes-Lewis, you're the founder and CEO of Mentivity, an award-winning mentoring organisation working across London and Brighton. 0345 6060 973 is my number. Do you share the Prime Minister's concern about a rebounding of violence and crime once the lockdown starts to be lifted? Again, I think Mr. Holmes-Lewis is right. That feels pretty obvious if everybody's been locked up in their homes. But I guess it's the type of crime and how many more people might be persuaded to be involved in things like gang violence, street crime, knife crime, as a result of the lockdown that is hopefully going to start lifting shortly. 0345 6060 973. Your call's in just a moment. Tom Swarbrick here, 318.
This is LBC.
You can always trust those old family photos to spark off nostalgia. Throwback to impressive perms, shell suits and avocado bathrooms. Your home contains precious memories, so protect it with a security system to make sure you're looking back for all the right reasons. Just visit trustedtrader.com and search through plenty of vetted, reviewed, reliable professionals in an abundance of trades. Like alarmingly good security installers.
When you're not feeling well, we're here for you. With Livy, our GPs are always here for you when you need them. So you can see a GP by video the same day, 7 days a week. Anyone living in England can use our pay-as-you-go service. Simply download the Livy app now. L-I-V-I. Livy. See a GP by video. Appointments cost £29, including prescription writing, fit notes and referrals.
TalkTalk's winter deals are here, with great offers across our fast, reliable 18-month fibre broadband plans. Average speeds from 38 up to 145 megabits per second, and prices starting from just £22 a month. All with award-winning super safe online security included. Perfect for streamers, gamers, callers, workers and shoppers. Get high speeds at low prices with our winter deals. Search TalkTalk Fibre. TalkTalk for everyone. Offer ends 17th of Feb, subject to local availability. £4.95 postage and packaging. T's and C supply.
In 1975, Vanguard was founded on a revolutionary idea to help more people become successful investors.
The idea caught on.
People told their friends.
And they told their friends.
Now, Vanguard has 30 million investors worldwide, and it's a Which recommended provider for investment platforms once again in 2020. Join us today. Vanguard, value to investors. When investing, your capital is at risk.
Oh, this is the life. Kicking back, sipping a cocktail on a beach in Bali. Sounds good, right? Well, you can join me and many others if you invest in this stock market beating opportunity. But hurry, it'll be gone soon.
That's the sound of something that's too good to be true. If you're offered an investment with a time-limited deal, positive reviews or promised unrealistic returns, it's likely to be a scam. Smart investors check the FCA's warning list before they invest. Search Scam Smart.
We all like our parts covered, especially when someone accidentally walks in.
Hey, I'm here!
With British Gas Home Care, fortunately, both your parts and labour are covered, which means no unexpected repair bills. Sign up by the 15th of Feb and get a gift card worth up to £50. And if you're a British Gas Energy customer, get a gift card worth up to £75. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions and exclusions apply. British Gas. Here to solve.
Fillet of fish from a dish. Share box and evening frocks. Big Mac down a cul-de-sac and even under a drying rack. Medium fries in rainy skies. Or maybe cheeseburgers in the bath. How daft. Wraps through cat flaps, nugs on rugs, or perhaps a chicken sandwich to the river. Because yes, we deliver. Download Uber Eats or Just Eat and enjoy McDonald's at home. And participating McDonald's at locations only. See mcdonalds.co.uk/McDelivery to see if there's one near you. See Uber Eats or Just Eat app for full details. Delivery fee applies.
This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
You've had enough waffling from me on this. Let's come straight to your calls. 3:21 is the time. Stephen's a new caller in Lewisham. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, hi.
Hi, so your thoughts on this potential rebounding of crime that the Prime Minister's worried about?
Awesome. So basically, so far, obviously I used to carry a knife when I was younger, and I realised just because of my insecurity on the road, like walking on the street, sometimes I had the fear that someone's going to, as I was saying, roll up on you, and they will try and maybe mug you or take something from you with a knife or even with a weapon. So I have to prepare myself just in case that happens. And obviously as I grew older, started to go into the gym, learning how to defend myself by going to defense classes, my insecurities towards that diminishes. So the same way that you deal with viruses, where you have the antibodies, right? And sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Yeah, the only way to defend yourself from being from being infected, for example, sometimes, is by making sure your lifestyle changes. You're healthy, you start becoming more healthier, which will increase your metabolism or your immune system, right? So it can defend itself. So the only way to encourage young children to remove their knives and to drop it down, which obviously is going to be quite a difficult one, is by telling them to drop the knife, but replacing it with something else that they can use to defend themselves. People are saying boxing, but I don't really believe that boxing itself can relieve that. Well, it can to an extent, but I believe self-defense classes and letting them understand that being physical, being able to be strong physically itself is good enough, rather than carrying a knife.
Let me ask you a bit about your knife carrying days.
Yeah.
How old were you when you were taking a knife out for your own protection?
I was carrying it maybe like secondary school, probably like 13, I say 12, 13 upwards till I was 17, yeah.
And the other thing that really strikes me listening to you is you must have been brought up in, or you must have felt like you were being brought up in an area which was incredibly violent.
Well, you know what,
violence on every corner if you're having to carry a knife from those at that very young age, or you feel like you have to. Of course you shouldn't be, but you feel like you have to.
Do you know what, everywhere you go to, there's always going to be a group of boys that think they can take the myth out of you or try and take things from you. Everywhere you go, even if you go to Whitechapel, Central London, even near the Parliament Square, all that area, so there's always going to be a group of people waiting. There's always hyenas everywhere.
Stephen, what I don't know about is, because I think whenever we have these conversations about knife crime, it gets a bit London-centric. We get stuck on this issue of London.
No, it's not London.
And, well, there are clearly other parts of the UK where this is an issue too. But it does strike me that your description of being brought up in London, which is something I don't know about, I've never lived in London, is horrendous. I mean, is London so dangerous as to be a city that a young black boy growing up in needs to carry a knife for their own protection?
To be fair to you, right, London is not as dangerous as Johannesburg in South Africa. London is not as dangerous as certain countries in Nigeria or Delhi, or even in the Eastern European countries like Spain or France. London is not that dangerous. Sometimes it's obviously exploded through social media because it is breaking news when someone dies. know, it's something that needs to touch base and needs to be discussed. Because obviously this place is a place of freedom, and it's supposed to be a place of freedom and peace, right? That's the way it's supposed to be presented to people. So when you're seeing crimes and people losing their lives, it's a major thing. But in Johannesburg, Nigeria, there's people dying right now every second, being stabbed up, being thrown in the river. There's always someone dying, but it's just media has obviously made it much more bigger than what it is. People have been dying for a very, very long time, but you know, you just got to increase the.
But Stephen, what strikes me is there could be another boy, 12, 13 years old, walking the same streets as you, for whom their experience of living and being brought up in London is completely different. They can walk the same streets at the same time and not feel the need to carry a knife. So why do you think it's people like you that are being targeted and not people like me or others?
Do you know what? Sometimes it's all in your head, right? As what they might say. But sometimes it's PTSD, right? It's post-traumatic stress disorder. You might have experienced something really, really traumatic, and you sometimes find it hard to sleep at night because that thing happened, right? So it causes you to like, no, I'm never gonna be able to.